The Building Better Business podcast is the best place to learn how to take your business to the next level. It's no longer enough to earn good profits. You need to develop a network of connections as well as use all types of marketing to your advantage that will put you over the edge. Hosted by me, Steve Eschbach, a financial executive with decades of experience in dealing with businesses and business people, we'll learn how this all comes together. Join me and my expert guests as we delve into the many facets of owning the business and how to become a good, caring business owner. Listen how making a difference in your community can attract all sorts of clientele, which in turn will build you a better business.
Greetings, listeners, and welcome to another edition of Building Better Businesses. I am your host, Steve Eschbach. I'm the owner of Transworld Business Advisors of Naperville, Illinois, and I'm delighted to have a good friend and business colleague, Mike Berry, with me today. Mike also does what I do, but he does it in Indiana. He owns the Indiana office, which basically covers the entire state of Indiana. And he's been doing that for a few years. I'm going to have him go through his background in a short moment. And as I said, I welcome you to another edition of Building Better Businesses. Mike, welcome, and thanks for joining me today.
Well, good morning, Steve. Thanks for having me on the show. It sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun, so I look forward to it.
Sounds good. So, Mike, I know that you are an M&A professional like myself, but in order for our audience to get a little better perspective of who Mike is, let's kind of rewind the videotape way back. Let's start with your childhood and tell me about your upbringing. Tell me about how your childhood was like, what kind of influence your parents had on you, and what were your interests back then, and how did you turn into who you are today?
You know, that's kind of funny. I grew up central Indiana, Lafayette, Indiana, on a farm, basically. My father and mother were still very close to them today. Father always worked two jobs. He was a farmer, and he worked at a local manufacturing company as well. Always worked two jobs. And so my background of growing up on a farm and going through high school, playing sports and doing things like that, it kind of all melds into, I go back to, we buy and sell businesses today, and that's what we do. So, but I used to back on the farm, buy and sell farm equipment when I was like 6, 7, 10, 12 years old. That was just kind of what we did growing up on a farm. So when you kind of fast forward that into the world that we live in today, it's much the same process. You look at things you like, you look at things you don't like, and you have some things in mind that you want to do. So it's kind of an interesting process. But my background growing up on a farm in central Indiana, and it was a good experience.
So when you were a child, what kind of influence did your parents, what did your mother and father do, and how did the influence, I know the farm was a big influence on you, but were they trying to steer you in a different direction at all, or?
They didn't, Steve. I went through, played sports in high school, and I was in a number of different things in high school. I was in choir. I was in some of the musicals. I was played basketball, just in a lot of different activities. And some of those things kind of shapes your process. And so as I got into college, I started went to graduate in their accounting program there, and it kind of shapes you all the way through. But at the end of the day, I never realized I'd be doing what I'm doing today, but it's kind of fun. So you look at all that background, it's a accumulation of all those years, but it's fun. So my parents had a great influence on me. My mom was in sales. She actually, I don't know if you ever heard of a company called Home Interiors, but she sold for a company called Home Interiors she had at one time 100 ladies reporting to her that they actually went into people's homes and sold products that goes on the walls, which is really kind of interesting. As I said, my dad was a farmer earlier and worked in a manufacturing plant. So, you take the combination of all those things growing up, and this is where we sit today. So it has a big influence on what we do.
Cool. So you went to Purdue, you had a degree in accounting. What was the first job you got outside of your college days?
Yeah, funny things. I worked in the insurance industry for a while. So I worked as a fee-based financial planner when I first got out of college for about a year. Both the gentleman I worked with and I were very technically oriented. So we were very good planners, but neither one of us were marketers. So after about a year, I actually decided that, that world probably wasn't it for me. But after I was there for about a year, maybe a year and a half, but I was actually in the insurance industry for 25 years. So it's kind of interesting where you start and where you end. As I said, the first year in financial planning, I got out of that world for about 2 years, but I stayed in traditional accounting finance path. And then about my fourth or fifth year out of school, I took a job as assistant CFO of a company called Golden Rule Insurance. And it was a great position for me. I was able to talk to all the executives, learn all the different processes in the company, and be back then I'm a business model junkie. I kind of led our competitor intelligence group for a company that size. So Golden Rule did about $650 million in revenue. They were the largest independent health insurance company in the United States back then. This was in the early 90s. So I was there for 7 years as assistant CFO, but it kind of got my forerunner into the M&A world and the finance world. And it was a good place to kind of cut your teeth and grow. So it was fun.
So I understand you had some mergers and acquisitions business beyond that. Was that with Great Insurance, with your insurance background?
Yeah.
Or did that
Yes.
beyond that?
Yeah, I did. So I worked for 4 or 5 different insurance companies. And growing up through that process, I became the last 3 companies I worked with. I was treasurer and corporate development officer. And in that corporate development title, I was the head M&A guy for the last 3 insurance companies I worked for. So I bought and sold insurance companies and a lot of different types of companies that are ancillary buyers with and sellers through the insurance world. We add those services on to the insurance companies. And the funny thing is, one of the biggest companies I worked for, it was a publicly traded life insurance company. And they got to the point where the board decided that it was talking about a precursor to our business today, that insurance world was such a balance sheet heavy business that they actually took me down a path to look at different companies that were revenue-based income, fee-based income, where it wasn't balance sheet heavy. So kind of a precursor to this world, I probably looked at 300 to 400 companies a year that were fee-based income producers in that world. It was kind of, at the time, I had no idea, but that was really a nice precursor to what we do today, because that's exactly what you and I do today is buy and sell companies. And that's exactly the type of companies I was looking at back then, but just in the corporate world. So you never know where things are going to take you, I guess, at the end of the day.
So how did you get from there to your final destination? It may not be your final, but your current destination of owning and operating a Transworld franchise in the state of Indiana. So how did that happen?
Well, I hope this is my final destination. So I'm 55 today and would like to run it for another 9 or 10 years. But I've been doing this for 8 years. Funny thing, I spent 25 years in the corporate world, and after a little while, you get kind of tired of the corporate environment, what's going on in the corporate world. And I was out networking. We moved back to the Indianapolis area. My last corporate job would take me to Missouri. We'd moved back to the Indianapolis area, and I didn't have a job. I was just out networking, looking for a job. And one of my current advisors today actually said, "Hey, have you ever heard about the Transworld platform? With your M&A background, it would be a great fit for you," because he and his son had actually looked at the platform. So as you're out networking, you never know what's going to happen. And he actually introduced me to Transworld. And then I took a day to went down and look at the platform and realized, hey, this could be a lot of fun. Instead of working with corporations and buying and selling corporations, it intrigued me to actually work with individuals and groups of individuals, private equity groups. It's a lot more fulfilling than the corporate world, I think. So it gives us a lot more purpose today as we get out of bed than it did before. Let's put it that way. So
I guess you kind of answered the question. I'm going to ask you, what do you like best about what you do? But it sounds like you have an opportunity to A, meet a lot of people, and B, work with a lot of different types of businesses and understand the whole business process in various industries. Did I get that right? Or is there something else you want to add to that?
I mean, at the end of the day, what I love about this business is we see multiple businesses every week, every day, and we get to be business model jockeys. And at the end of the day, it's what other businesses out there that you can actually look at different businesses and find different things, look at different business models on a day-to-day basis and not have any repetition out there. It's really a joyful process. The other thing is, I would tell you, is we provide to the individuals a service today that as I said, in the corporate world, it just was not a lot of fun. But today you get to meet those individual relationships. You actually mean something to families, individuals, and even groups of people. And it's a much more rewarding relationship than the past. So that's probably the number one thing. The second thing is actually the ability to look at multiple types of businesses and be that business model jockey that everybody kind of wants to be out there today.
So if you had any advice to give business owners, or let's go on the business owner side. So of the many businesses, and I heard at least 300 to 500, there's probably more with your Transworld experience. What would you say would be the best time to start preparing to sell a business? And I know you've met many of them. And is there a particular time of operation that you would say an owner should be starting to think about maybe exit planning?
I'm going to roll this up at a very high level. That's a very good question, Steve. And you and I haven't had this conversation before, so it's interesting. But it's all about energy and how people enjoy the business they're in. If they start to lose that energy and enjoy not being around the business, it's really kind of time to get out of it. And so you start looking at exit strategies and things like that. Once you first notice that as an individual, I would say there's a year or two, maybe even 3-year planning process for you to exit that business. And as soon as you notice that and you see those early warning signs of, I just don't enjoy this anymore, or this doesn't do for me and my family what I really want it to, I would suggest that people start that exit planning. And it can be up to 2-3-year process, but that's kind of at a high level. Individually, we work with a lot of people who are retiring, and sometimes that can be anywhere from 45 to 65, 75, or 80 these days because of our big generation that we're dealing with these days. It all comes down to, I had an 80-year-old one time, I asked him if he wasn't ready to retire. He goes, no, I'm not really ready to retire. I love the business. And so when that love for the business fades away, I think it's then time to look at that process.
How about on the buy side? So you probably deal with many buyers as well. If you had to advise them as to what they should be focusing in on when they're evaluating a business, what would be like the top 3 things you would recommend that they have to really take a strong look at?
Yeah, that's obviously on the buy side, it's passion. And that's one of the common denominators you see about a successful business. If you don't have a passion for a business, you're not going to enjoy the ups and downs of that business. And some businesses can be more downs than ups. So the passion is the number one thing if you're looking for. So find something you're interested in, find something you love, find something you like to do. Second thing is don't put yourself into a highly leveraged situation, especially if you're somebody coming out of the corporate world or somebody that's been in a situation where you've been drawing a salary. Put yourself in a comfortable leverage situation. So if you need to go a year or two without a paycheck, you can actually do that and live through those lows and highs. And I would say the third thing is make it family friendly for you. If you're a family person and you've got time to do other things with your family, everybody wants to do that. But the entrepreneur kind of gets trapped into those 70, 80-hour work weeks, but you got to be able to put your family in there as well. So make sure your priorities are kind of aligned when you buy a company. If you can get all 3 of those things lined up, I think you'll be successful. And not too many of those things are financial. Only one was financially driven. So if that helps any.
So we are in probably one of the more challenging years that anyone has ever experienced. And during the course of this year, Mike, would you say that anything has changed in terms of running a business, evaluating a business? I mean, last year at this time, we thought for sure this would be a normal year. And of course, we're at the end of 2020. We've gone through COVID-19. There have been a lot of adjustments. Is there any particular thing that stands out in your mind that you would, A, recommend to a business owner and maybe B, recommend to a buyer as they're evaluating businesses? Anything that's changed that would be like complete and this will carry through, or temporary? Any advice on the current environment we're going through?
That's a great question. I mean, we're 9 months, 10 months into this process now, Steve. And the funny thing is, I'd go back to the number one thing I told people: if you don't have a passion for your business, after 9 or 10 months of driving something that the customers aren't walking through the door, the revenue isn't coming through the door, and you've got to financially figure out how to get by, you've got to have that passion. And so the people who are, I think, going to be left next year and coming out still happy, have that passion, still enjoy the business, still enjoy the business model. And those businesses, as I mentioned earlier, if you were a little bit over levered, it's hard to get out of 2020 because you weren't making as much income as you were before. So make it financially sound, but also the passion's got to drive you through the business. And I think we see that more today than ever. At the end of the day, I would also say that choose a business model that is financially driven. You're passionate about it, but makes sense to, I'm going to say this an odd way, bankers, financial people as well. Because if you look at some people who could be passionate driven about the restaurant world or the hospitality world, that world today is really taking a huge hit. And so sometimes you might choose to do something that's not quite as exciting, but a little more financially stable. That's going to drive you through today's world a little longer than the past. So great question.
Your clients, Mike, and again, this goes back to both the buy side and the sell side. Is there any ideal type of client that you particularly prefer over others? Or are you trying to kind of, interview them and just see how best you can help them no matter what the industry is or what the type of client there are? Is there anything that, in terms of your business model, that is a, quote, ideal client?
My business model is a little different. We do both Main Street and the middle market work here, both on the sell side and the buy side. So my ideal client looks probably like a successful middle market company. He's grown the business from 2 to 3 million to 10 to 20 million, but they've enjoyed the ride over 15 or 20 years and have just got to the point where they're ready to retire, or the business is not passionate for them anymore and they're ready to sell. That's my ideal client today. But they still have great knowledge about the company. They want to see the company succeed. And so, when you look at selling and doing a transition period, it doesn't hurt them to do those types of things. But I would say that's probably more on the sell side. A buy side, I would say somebody who knows what they're looking for, has been out there a little while, who's been looking, somebody who's passionate about an industry, and so we can help them find that specific piece of the pie that works for them. But in general, as you and I have talked before, Steve, we're generalists, and so we can help a lot of people across the board in lots of different sizes of companies, both on the buy and the sell side. But it's that passion that's going to drive a lot of people both ways.
So is there any big wow moment in your career? So for example, is there any, and people think that I'm kind of crazy because I tell the world I never make any mistakes, but boy, do I go through a lot of learning experiences. And I take those learning experience and use that to improve myself. Is there anything that stands out in your career that was a kind of career changing moment that caused you or guided you to look at things a little differently to make you better at what you do?
It's interesting. So when I first started this business, I'm glad you asked that question. It's maybe not a wow moment for everybody, but it was a wow moment for me. Coming out of the corporate world and you start working with individuals. I was working with an individual seller who had a great business, HVAC company, did about $2 million in revenue. And he was going through some health crisis with his company. And he said to me, "I'm going to treat you like a brother." So he told me about all his personal things that was going on. And so when you get that kind of a relationship with somebody, it's very nice. So that was a wow moment for me. It's like, how impactful can we be on people?
Yeah, so definitely a great lesson learned. So we're about at the end of our time, Mike. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you want our listeners? And again, the whole theme is building better businesses, whether you be the owner or you be the buyer looking in. Is there anything that we may not have covered that you think is important for our audience to know?
I'm going to sound like a broken record when it comes from a broker, but, across middle market, Main Street, all those levels of businesses out there, you've got to keep good books and records. So if you're trying to build value in a company, keep good books and records, be passionate about the business, be adaptable every day when you come to work and listen to people around you and make decisions. Don't hem-haw around about decisions, make decisions and move forward. I mean, those are successful people that I've come across. You can think of a little while, but don't take too long to make a decision and move forward. Because as you mentioned earlier, we're all going to run down the wrong path. It's just how quickly we get to the right path.
So finally, Mike, how can people find out about you? Where can they go to get more information? I know you got a website just like I do. Any other contact info you want to leave our audience?
No, that'd be great. Thanks, Steve. It's Transworld Business Advisors. tworld.com is the main address. tworld.com/Indiana is our particular site. You can find me at mike.berry, BERRY @tworld.com as my email address. And would love to talk to you about your passion of your business, whether you want to buy or sell. So I appreciate you giving me the opportunity, Steve. What do you want to talk about, Steve, that I didn't get a chance to answer for you, sir?
I think you pretty much covered it. And I think one of the things I've learned over the course of my career is the old KLTR. You got to know someone, you got to like someone, you got to trust them. And then from there, you got the relationship going. And I think that's really what solidifies how you can help someone in what they want to do. And like you said, it's a passion. So if you're working with a business owner and you're passionate about helping them, that goes a long way. And I think what you said kind of hits the nail on the head is that you have to have an interest in their best outcome, and their best outcome might be exiting. Their best outcome might be going into the new business that they're looking at. But you've got to listen and respond and cater to their needs accordingly. So I think you did a great job. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me on. It's been awesome.
Thank you so much.